Hi, my name is Dwayne Gathers, and welcome to Civitas LA, featuring diverse and emerging leaders who make up this dynamic region and are creating community every day and building a better tomorrow. These bi-weekly conversations enable us to hear from, learn from, and be inspired by new generations of civic entrepreneurs who are forging a path forward in making our region a stronger, more resilient, and connected group of citizens. First off, let us say Happy New Year from Civitas LA. This episode is being released on Wednesday, January 5th. It is also fitting that this coming year, for Angelenos at least, it's a municipal election year. So we hope these conversations that we've had over the last 50-plus episodes will be listened to by many, and urge all of you to become engaged, become aware, and become inspired citizens, because we have a lot at stake this particular year. Now more than ever, our goal is to elevate civic discourse, foster community connections, and promote civic knowledge and engagement across our region while elevating diverse and emerging voices in that conversation. This particular episode is also important to me personally because it was 18 years ago, January 5th, 2004 specifically, that I moved down to Los Angeles from San Francisco. And it was a friend of mine who was living in the historic and iconic Ravenswood apartment building on Rossmore who said, "Dwayne, this is the most East Coast neighborhood in Los Angeles. This is the most outstanding neighborhood in Los Angeles. This is the most central neighborhood in Los Angeles. You got to live here." So I took that advice and found a place in this particular community, and 18 years later, I am still there. I am joyfully joined today in studio by three great civic leaders of the historic and iconic Larchmont community. Larchmont Boulevard in 2021 celebrated 100 years. This has been such a historic community, serving not only the communities of Larchmont, Hancock Park, and Windsor Square, but also is sort of a regional draw as well. And with us today in studio to discuss the past, the present, and the future of this amazing neighborhood are three great leaders. We are joined by Joanna Vernetti of Vernetti Restaurant, Todd Warner, owner and founder of Tail Waggers and Tail Waggers Foundation, and the dean of our crew this afternoon is Patty Lombard, longtime resident and co-publisher of the Larchmont Buzz. Patty, Joanna, and Todd, welcome to Civitas LA, and Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Thank you very much.
Happy New Year.
Yeah.
Great to have you all on today. So on Civitas LA, we always ask our guests to offer a brief personal introduction. Let's start with Patty.
Thank you so much. What a treat to be here. So I moved to Los Angeles in 1989 with my husband, who grew up here, and I grew up in South Florida, so didn't know anything about Los Angeles and was super excited to live in a historic neighborhood. We lived at the time in Ridgewood-Wilton neighborhood, and just really dove in and got involved in the neighborhood. And then about 6 years ago, Liz Fuller and I got involved in the Larchmont Buzz, which had been founded a few years earlier by two other local women. And we have been working harder than I think we thought we would. But we have been working really hard to tell the neighborhood story. And we've become, completely enamored with the community and the people and the architecture and the sense of community. So it's really nice to be here to talk to you about it.
We appreciate you being here. Joanna?
Hi. Thanks for having me today.
Good morning.
So my husband and I, Steve, we moved to Los Angeles in the late 90s. We lived for a few years near in an old apartment building, great architecture. We loved it, adored it, near the Grove. And at the time thought we'd never find a house that we loved as much as our apartment. It was so hard, and we were looking. And then we came across the fabulous Larchmont area and just really fell in love with the street, first of all, and said we have to find a house in this neighborhood. So I think it was 2003, so we've been in the neighborhood about as long as you have. Had 3 children, and then purchased our restaurant in 2013, and have just loved every minute of owning a business on that street.
Outstanding.
Yeah.
Todd, welcome.
Yeah, well, it's great to be here. What a great way to start the new year. Of course, I am the owner of Tail Waggers Pet Food and Supply, and the president and founder of the Tail Waggers Foundation, which is our nonprofit organization where we raise money for rescue dogs and cats. I'm a board member of the Friends of the Hollywood Central Park, which is a community project here, trying to build a 40-acre cap park over the freeway, and of course a board member of the Larchmont Boulevard Association. Proud member of the LGBT community, of the recovery and addiction community, HIV positive community, and of course animal welfare community. So I always like to kind of be very open about who I am, because that's the kind of the environment that I always want to create for my team members at Tailwaggers, and let them know that's always a safe, welcoming, and supportive environment to work in, and really for anybody in my life. So it's great to be here.
Great to have you on here. You know, Joanna, you mentioned something recently that you just simply, had to or really wanted to, you and Steve, to move to this area. And that's something that I heard early in my journey in LA as well, that a lot of people just so wanted to be in this particular community. So, what was it about this community that drew you to here?
I mean, obviously the neighborhood is beautiful, historic. The homes are amazing. And the street of Larchmont itself, Steve and I lived for a number of years in London. And in that city, there are a lot, it's like a group of villages, basically. And every area has what is referred to as a high street, which is where you go when the restaurants are there and the pub is there and all of the things that that bring that community together. And I think when we saw Larchmont, we were like, this feels like the high street of a beautiful neighborhood, and who wouldn't want to live here? And like you said, it's incredibly central to the rest of Los Angeles, so it's like the perfect community.
Yeah. Todd, what brought you to the neighborhood?
Well, I also lived. I lived at the Ravenswood for many years.
Oh, did you? Okay.
And then I lived at Brookside, which is a part of the Larchmont community, and then so it's always felt like home, and so I've actually been actively reaching out, trying to get back into Larchmont Boulevard. But really, it is the community, and it's the history. I love that there is so much history at Larchmont Boulevard, and you can be watching. The other day I was watching Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and I saw my building on that movie, and it's it was so great. So, and of course the people are amazing, and to have that real sense of community, and of course for me it's always seeing all the dogs walking up and down the street, which I love. So it's great.
Sure. And Patty?
Well, I think we moved, Bill and I moved here from New York City, and we were so excited. I had actually lived here for a brief time a couple years earlier and discovered all of those fabulous duplexes on Orange Drive and Mansfield and Sycamore. And I had said to Bill, when we move, this is where we need to go. His family was in the valley, and I thought, this is perfectly far enough away. This will be great. And it was. And then we discovered Larchmont shortly thereafter, because there was at the time this thing where you just did not go east. Right. That was the sort of prejudice, if you will. And also, but it lacked a real appreciation. I had some good friends who were architects at USC, and they didn't subscribe to that theory at all. And we talked a long time. Many times we do the Wilshire Spine Drive and go from the ocean to downtown and really understand the spine of Los Angeles that Wilshire Boulevard is. But anyway, once we discovered the neighborhood, we thought, this is really great. And we, too, looked and looked and looked and looked and found a house on Wilton Drive.
Oh, nice.
And we're super lucky to find it. We had looked, at the time, Silver Lake was super hot. But at last, my husband confessed that he could not find his way home if we moved to Silver Lake. So we had to stay in the flats.
No, it's amazing. So, let's go back just a little bit and share with our audience. We're so grateful that, we've got a large Los Angeles-based audience, but I'm grateful that Civitas LA actually has listeners in 54 countries, 35 countries now.
Impressive.
So we'd like to have on our community spotlights just a short history of the area. And I wanted to turn this over to Patty, because I know you actually have published a book on Larchmont that is for sale. So, so you're our resident historian this morning.
Okay. Well, what an honor it is to chronicle the history of the neighborhood. And the book is available at our local bookstore, Chevalier's, which is one of the oldest independent bookstores in the city. But last year was the 100th anniversary. Julius LaBonte developed the neighborhood in 1921, and he was, like many real estate developers at the time, someone who came into the community after having achieved a certain amount of fortune and amassed a great amount of wealth in the Northeast, and decided he was going to retire and have a second career. And he chose real estate development. And what he did was he created a commercial district, a retail district between Beverly Boulevard and First Street that would serve the surrounding neighborhoods. He has been credited with building the city's first neighborhood shopping street, according to news reports at the time. It was originally built in a Mission Revival style architecture with clay tile roofs, but the buildings have been significantly altered by different owners and tenants coming and going over the years. The surrounding neighborhoods have become increasingly more affluent, and the value of Larchmont real estate has really never been greater. As residents, building owners, business owners, and civic leaders, we took a look at the street in a sort of post-COVID landscape and began trying to imagine what would happen with the retail and the street going forward. This idea of neighborhood serving has always knitted everyone together, but over time, things have changed. Retail has given way to dining, including our beloved angled parking, which everyone adores. It's now been broken up with parklets, which actually people tell us they like, which is kind of cool. Street furniture has disappeared and planters have disappeared from the street, as well as street trees that were planted in the 60s have died, some of whom, and have been replaced somewhat intermittently. Yet, much of the original charm and uniqueness of the street remains intact, in part because of its location in a community that deeply cares about its well-being and its unique attribute of size. It's just one block long, and that's bounded by the affluent residential neighborhoods. So the sense of community is very powerful.
No, absolutely. So, Joanna, you've mentioned that you and Steve moved to the area 20 years ago, but you've had a business there about 6 years. So what led you to become business owners on the boulevard?
I mean, we left the street, and Steve has worked in restaurants and has had a career as a chef, since he was in his early 20s. And we always thought it would be amazing to have a restaurant on the street, but it's hard to get a restaurant on the street. There's a limited amount of restaurants that you can have, so you can't just take any retail space and put a restaurant there. And we had a friend of ours who was a mutual friend with a family that owned Girasole, which is where where we're now located, and they were interested in selling their business, and so they presented it to us, and we said, yes, please, we'll take that, we'll do that, and that's how we ended up there.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And Todd, your new business on the boulevard, you opened up during the pandemic. So how did you find that space, and how did you navigate the pandemic on the boulevard last year?
Yeah, well, I've actually, because I'm so in love with the boulevard, I've been wanting to be a part of Larchmont Village, or Larchmont Boulevard, for years, and in particularly the space that I'm at. Years ago it was a Blockbuster. It was my Blockbuster when I lived there, and when I opened up Tailwaggers, I always knew that space would be the ideal space because of its location on the boulevard, because of the parking and everything that we have. And so for the last 10 years, I've actively been reaching out to the owners or to the broker of the building in hopes that someday that this could actually happen. So, eventually, 10 years later, because I think of my persistence of constantly reaching out, and because, probably in, good or bad reasons, but because of the pandemic, the owners of the building were very welcoming to they wanted a small business owner, a local independent owner there on the boulevard, because they too love Larchmont Boulevard. So they were very receptive and were able to kind of work out a deal that I could be able to get on the boulevard. So that's been amazing. And when I opened, I actually thought we were at the end of the pandemic. Actually, our grand opening was that couple weeks where all the restrictions were taken off. We didn't have to wear masks indoors or outdoors or anything. So we thought we were in the clear. And so I think it's just, like what I always tell my team at Telwaggers, we just kind of constantly are readjusting and realizing, you never know what challenges you're going to have that day, or what's going to happen. But you just, kind of lead with compassion and just do the best. But I've been so fortunate to be on the Boulevard. Yeah.
And that's your third location. I believe you got two others. Where are those?
The other one is in Los Feliz, or the Beechwood Canyon area,
Okay.
1929 North Bronson, and then the other one's in West Hollywood on Fairfax.
Gotcha. Well, you touched on something, having opened during COVID and thinking that it was over. And a number of our community spotlight conversations, we've addressed the issue of how that community has come together and navigated COVID as a community. And Larchmont, of course, is a very vibrant commercial center that really thrives on foot traffic, and just people just strolling around. So, speak to me, speak to our audience, how you think the community did navigate COVID and what some of the impacts have been. Joanna, do you want to start with that?
Sure. Obviously, when, March of 2020, when things first kind of really started to get crazy, everyone's like, a few weeks, we'll ride the storm out. And then, we initially closed for a couple of weeks because we're not the type of business that, in our minds lended itself to take out immediately. And then we realized this is long term. Like, we're going to have to weather the storm. So we set up our online takeout, and we had great support from the community. And I think, people have been. It does put a spotlight on small businesses, something like this. Like, it's the front line of who's going to really get affected by this. And I think people have really stepped up and have started to understand how important small businesses are.
Sure. Patty, thoughts on how the community responded to COVID?
Well, we saw a great outpouring. One of the first things that we started to do in the Buzz was we wrote these COVID reports. And we reached out to all of the small businesses and said, we're digital. We can offer you free advertising. We can offer you the amplification of your social media, and we're going to do that for free. So keep the information flowing to us. And so we did that, and we did that for, I would say, the first 6 months of the shutdown. And then people started to acclimate to that lifestyle. We did see some stores ultimately close because what they realized was that they really needed a lot more foot traffic. There are 4,000 people on the Paramount lot, and none of those people were coming to work. And so there are still some long-term impacts of that. We have now a Wednesday farmers market because the Sunday farmers market got so crowded and the street was so quiet that the farmers market managers came up with the idea of doing a Wednesday market. We also had seen some development going on. We saw some real estate entities who own large portions of the street decide that this was a good time to do construction. So we actually saw, unfortunately, more businesses being turned out at the end of last year. So there was a huge amount of disruption, which is really concerning to people in the neighborhood because we know Joanna and Steve. We know Todd. We want to see them be very successful. And it's really a tricky balance of threading the needle of who can be on Larchmont and sustain the kind of real estate rent.
So a lot of communities did go to outdoor dining, and we're blessed by having such weather in Southern California. And Joanna, I know you said that really was a lifesaver for your restaurant, and the flexibility of the city to allow that. So how did you all respond to that? And do you think that's going to continue to be important to your business to be onto the street?
Still, the large portion of the people who come to see us want to eat outside. So yes, I would, until COVID's gone, which who knows, it could be years, I feel like that's going to be important to dining, is the ability to eat outside. And like you said, LA is the perfect place for that type of dining. And I was amazed by how quickly the city came up with that program and how easy it was for a restaurant to get those spaces. Like, in dealing with any large city, oftentimes a permit for anything takes forever.
Sure.
But that was like, sort of overnight practically. And it really did, it was the perfect moment, and it allowed us to keep our business open.
Mm-hmm. Now, Todd, your business is a different business model, so how did you respond and react?
Well, right away, I remember like March 2020, like when that happened, it's like, it just, all of a sudden, we, I think within a week, lost about half of our staff. And we were, I was debating, do I close or what do we do? We end up closing our grooming and our salon area and our daycare. But what we did is, we really every so often we would do delivery to people. So we kind of really just pivoted and made that like a big part of our business. So really during the day, I'd be working. Our hours were shortened. We had very short hours. And then in the evening, I would get my dogs and put them in the car, and I would just deliver dog food to all of our, as many customers that wanted it to their home. And that was kind of nice because I got to still see some of my customers. And so we did that I was doing that for about 6 months, and then I finally realized that this is going to be with us for a while. So hired our own delivery drivers, and now our delivery is going great. We do the free same-day delivery and locally, and of course the curbside pickup has been really great too. So just trying to, figure it all out, as it goes. And luckily the city has been very supportive, in so many ways. And Patty's been amazingly supportive. When we came in, she's like, tell me, let me put stuff out about your business. Let me, promote it and stuff like that, which is so amazing. So,
Well, the community was really happy to see Steve and Joanna pivot and they were one of the first ones to do a really nice dining platform. And then happy to have someone like Todd with the belief that he could open, because you really opened post-March, right? I think it was the summertime. And he actually has a little parking lot, which makes it much easier. You're doing pet adoptions on the weekends. He's doing a lot of things to activate the street and to bring people there. So it was easy for us. And it's always good for a media outlet to write what people want to read about.
Right.
That's a no-brainer.
Well, I had the pleasure of strolling down the boulevard a few Saturdays ago, or last Saturday, and stumbling upon Steve's Santa Paws event where he had actually real snow and the whole Santa outfit. So it was a great joy to see that. One thing I've noted, you said early in a statement that business attracts business, and that one of the main things to have a more successful Larchmont is lower the vacancy rates. And I know there has been some concern about a rise in vacancy rates, in part due because the prices of those spaces. And again, it's such a highly desirable community to live in, and that's changing the nature of retail. So I'm curious to see how the rising prices of space, vacancy rate issues, and of course pandemic, is changing the nature of the type of retail that can come into or want to come into the boulevard, and how does that change neighborhood character? Patty, do you have any thoughts on that first?
Well, it's interesting because there's a large stretch, about 13 storefronts, that's being currently renovated by a developer, and they have announced 2 tenants. One is Holy Grail Donuts, which is based in Honolulu. It's a taro donut product. Okay. And then the other one is a laser facial company called Skin Laundry. They have many, many locations. Those are small, maybe 1,000-foot storefronts. And that probably gives you an idea of who's going to inhabit that 13-front stretch.
We can go get a facial and then get a donut.
So these are companies that are capitalized with more than Joanna and Steve or Todd. So that's some concern. Another company, and they're also not exactly retailers, but we did have Rothy's Shoes open. We did have Corridor NYC, which is a men's clothing store. And those are nice new additions because they're retail, but they are not me and you opening a store, a gift store or stationery or something like that. So it's concerning, but they're not empty, which is really great. We also did hear that FedEx office, FedEx, whatever their next, iteration is going to take that large space that used to be Trina Turk.
Oh, right. Wow.
But that's not exactly what you want to see. In an ideal world, it would be so great if we could have a curated kind of sense of the street. However, because we don't own all the real estate, we can find as a community ways to encourage and support and vote with our feet. And we can use the city ordinances maybe to encourage things. But it's still very much a challenge because retail is challenged all over. Even the high streets in Great Britain are challenged, and they're doing really interesting things where the government is basically subsidizing landlords' rent so they can let a little art gallery open. I don't quite see that happening in Los Angeles, the capitalist real estate mega that we are, but it is very concerning right now, and we're at a really interesting juncture.
Mm-hmm. And, Joanna, as a business on the boulevard, what are your thoughts on that?
Again, you're right that it's that balance of retail and restaurants and services like the bank or FedEx that you sort of makes that street magical. But it is concerning if the lion's share of the businesses on the street are, businesses that you could go anywhere to go to visit.
City.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but capitalism is what this country is founded on. So it's like, I understand. If I was a landlord, I also understand to a certain extent you can charge the rent that you can get. So it's tricky, but I guess what makes it valuable is the charm of the street. And so if you don't curate that to a certain extent, but you've got multiple landlords, so it's a hard one.
I'm curious, Patty, if you might know the answer to this. What percentage of the property ownership may reside somewhat locally versus businesses that are local, like Steve and Joanna?
It's definitely a minority. It used to be a majority. Todd's landlord is a good example. Mm-hmm. They do live locally, and they worked very hard to make it possible.
To get me in there, which was great, because they have have a personal investment in the community,
sure.
But I think like what Joanna was saying too, and Patty is this, I think it's concerning because because unless we do something like what Britain is doing and stuff like that, and like really support some of these local galleries, florists, and so these mom and pops, it's really. I mean, I understand where a landlord has to make, the profit to pay the property taxes and to do everything. I understand that, but I also am fearful that we're going to lose a lot of really kind of uniqueness and once that's gone, it's really hard to get back. I think we should be encouraging more people to like really take the leap and the jump and support them to open up, what is important to them and, their passion, I would like to see more government involvement in, really promoting that. Like, I think the Center for Yoga, they're another great place there on the boulevard they've been there and it's privately owned and stuff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So it's great.
Well, that's an interesting segue because I know 2021 was the 100th year celebration of the Boulevard, and Patty, you were part of a team of people who led a number of community conversations about the status of the Boulevard and its future. So share with us what came of those community conversations and what are some of the next steps.
Well, the good news is that we had over 450 people take a survey, which is written by my dear friend John Kalitsky, who is an urban planner, but not, he really wanted to know a lot. So it takes about 10 minutes. It's not a super quick Instagram survey.
Yeah.
It's a speck of a deep dive, but they also left us 240 some comments. The survey is still open by the time this airs. We will have a lot more data. But what...
Let's stop you there.
Yeah.
How do we access the survey? Yeah.
So larchmont2021.com, you can go access it. And we'll also put the results there. And then also on the Larchmont Buzz, if you Google for Larchmont 2021, you'll see our stories and our links, and you can go take it. And then hopefully later today, I'm going to give Joanna and Todd a QR code that they can put in their stores and their shops and encourage people to take it there.
Okay.
The more people who take it, the better. But what we're seeing is that it's a really locally supported street.
Sure.
Which is not surprising, but it is surprising, because we worry about parking. But right now, I would not be surprised if at the end of the day, about half the people drove there and half the people walked there.
Yeah.
That tells you something really interesting. And that also tells you that, when people complain about trash or trees or sidewalks, it's because they're there all the time. The number of people who answered the survey who told us that they came between 1 and 6 times a week is like the majority of the people. That's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
So I can't tell you any more than that.
Okay.
I'm sworn to
that's good
secrecy.
know. Well, you talked about such a great response. I'm curious, Joanna, you've moved out into the street. Todd does a lot to activate the street. You talked about these community conversations. I'm wondering if in these conversations there was any thought about reimagining streetscape on the boulevard and the radical step of actually closing down the street to traffic, to cars altogether. What's the thought on that?
Music to my ears. I actually think there's a real interest in closing down the street periodically, testing the waters a little bit to see what that would feel like. There's a lot of people who worry about my customers won't find me if they can't park. So this is where the data really will help us and inform us. But we could certainly do a once a month. We could certainly do some other things. And we're really only talking about one block. And maybe we could figure out a way to get access to the 2 parking garages that we do have. So I think Larchmont that's definitely, we asked people to rank things that they were interested in, things they wanted to see. So all of that will help inform a further conversation about what people might like to actually see happen. But yeah, you live in the neighborhood. How do you get there?
I walk. I simply adore walking on a Saturday morning. I am, a friend of mine who's a board colleague who lives further down on Rossmore. We were having coffee at LaBonge TDN, and we were talking about our respective time on the boulevard. He says, "You're a creature of habit, aren't you?" And I said, "I walk the same route, to my dry cleaner, to the bank, to LaBonge TDN, Burger Lounge if I'm on the go. So I walk, absolutely." Now this is great. So I'm curious to know. Certainly, one other conversation that I've heard over the years on the boulevard. It's cute, it's charming, but the change in nature of retail, particularly dining, is impacted by the fact that I don't know if there are not allowed or there just simply are no liquor licenses on the boulevard. And I'm curious to talk about liquor on the boulevard, particularly from our restaurateur here, Joanna.
There are, you can get wine and beer. But as far as I know, unless something's changed recently, you're not allowed to get a full alcohol license.
And is this and where and how is this prescribed? In
Q condition?
Q conditions, okay.
Actually, it's really interesting. The Q conditions do not specifically address alcohol.
You're right. You're right, actually, thinking about it. I think it's just you have to kind of get permission from the various neighborhood organizations, and it's just sort of unwritten that that's not happening, essentially.
Okay. So, Patty, you lived in the area the longest, so tell us about the neighborhood organizations and how...
So the neighborhood associations have traditionally opposed a full line of alcohol. There is no one on the street between Beverly and First that has a full line of alcohol, except 2 doors north of Beverly, Chandara has one. Further up, Cali Restaurant has one. It is really just this funny little island right there that does not have one. And actually, I think there's more interest in supporting restaurants. Joanna made a very compelling argument at our community conversation about how, it's a 20% differential in their profitability. So And it's a mixed drink. I mean, it's not, and I think people are feeling very differently about it. So we'll see. That's one of the things we've asked people to tell us in the survey is, what do you think about that? And then the city has better programs for policing it. So if you've got a bad actor who's got a liquor license and the neighborhood doesn't like it, you have to get your hours approved. You have to get all kinds of conditions met. And the LAPD is part of that permitting process. And they're not, excited about giving large numbers of permits out either. So it might be one of those things that will change.
Mm-hmm. I know, and this is very sort of LA inside baseball. And of course, we've just gone through this redistricting process here in the city of Los Angeles. And, the late Councilmember Tom LaBonge was such an ally and advocate for Larchmont and preserving that village feel. More recently, the Larchmont community is now going to be part of the Council District 13. How do you think that may impact how stakeholders in the Boulevard approaches and engages with city government?
Well, we'll actually be part 13 and part CD5. Yeah. So we've really... I actually think that it would have been nice. It's easier to just have one person to go and harass, but now we have two. Right. And I think that's kind of cool. And I think right now Paul Koretz is going to finish his term, and then we have a really interesting field of candidates who are looking to take his place. Mitch O'Farrell will be there, and he has a great history of supporting community revitalization for all of his work here in this neighborhood where we are near Emerson. So I would say that it's going to be an opportunity for the neighborhood, and we'll have to do our best to educate him and to get him to meet both of them, to meet, because it really, the commerce piece doesn't stop at the district lines. Right. Crime doesn't stop at the district lines, so we have to really do a good job. I think it's kind of a great opportunity for the community to have more advocates in City Hall.
Sure. Well, I think I'm just one block outside of the new CD13, so I'm over in CD5 now. So I'll just wave across the street to you all.
You're a perfect example.
So as the changing nature of retail changes and comfort with online shopping, what are some of the things that you're hoping to do this coming year in terms of navigating the post-pandemic period, but also how people now engage with your shop?
Yeah, well, like for me, it is like going to, even doing more deliveries to people's home, because people have gotten used to that and that convenience. I always say we should be able to do everything that the big guys do, as far as the big box pet food and supplies do, but do it better. And we offer, I always say, we can do it better. And not only that, but we can provide, like when people come in with their dogs and like giving a dog a treat and stuff like that, that's something that nobody can do online, the events that we do and being a part of. So I think that's really key for our survival, is like being able to bring the community. I want people to feel really good about shopping at Tailwaggers and that they want to support us, because it's we're there. We're a part of their community. We are part of their family. So I think really just focusing on that, like really just kind of how do we get even more involved? How do we, help people through? So many people got new dogs and new kittens and stuff like that through the pandemic.
That's part of their coping.
So like how do we help them, these new pet owners and stuff like that? So that's.
Well, that's interesting because, I think some of the data that Patty shared with us about the percentage of people who actually walk versus drive to the Boulevard. And I think part of the experience and part of the joy is this is an experience. It's a really positive experience. Mm-hmm. So you want to go into that store and, look at the books and Chevaliers, or you want to go have a cup of coffee and sit there and watch people go by. So, I think the Boulevard is a really different animal in that people want to be out and experience it, because it's such a I just can't express anything other than joy. Such a joyful experience. So, Joanna, what's in store for Nettie in 2022?
I mean, we just want to keep serving the community, and we really are hoping that the outdoor dining situation can remain. As of now, we'll get an email occasionally saying, "Oh, it's been extended a few more months," but as of now, it ends December 2021.
Oh,
I mean,
really?
we haven't had, unless I've missed an email, something saying that the permit's extended. But I don't think anyone's coming to take them down either. So I think it's fine. And but we want to sustain and be there and keep seeing the people that come and see us all the time. Yeah.
So given everything that we've discussed and the charrettes that have been organized, what assets does Larchmont need to cultivate to move the community forward? What things may need to change going forward?
Well, it's really interesting. When Julius LaBonte created the street, he was looking for a way to serve that neighborhood community. And that was sort of the beginning of, the shopping districts when Los Angeles was first forming in the 20s. Hollywood served Hollywood, downtown, etc. So this was his vision. And honestly, we are sort of like everything that's old is new again. It's the same idea. People do really want to shop locally. They want to support their local businesses. And retail has changed. It's experiential, though, still. You want to touch and feel the thing that you're going to buy. Even my millennial children, who are serious online shoppers, will say to me, I think I just want to go try that on. I think I just want to see that in person, Mom. And so I feel like we're never going to lose that desire to have that personal contact that we have. And, when you're not sure what to give your dog, you're going to ask, the nutritionist at Tail Waggers, or you're going to do a special family dinner at Vernetti, or just a great lunch. I mean, so I think exactly. I think we are seeing that interest that sort of remains the through line. We could curate the street a little better. We could clean it up a little bit more. We could it's great that the city quickly put those dining platforms in place, but it also left some in place when restaurants closed. So we still have parking spaces where somebody, like there's a new store that doesn't have parking in front of it because can't take down the dining platform. So that part, the city could do some things to improve that and to be more responsive. And, I just really quick back to the alcohol. This used to be you couldn't do takeout drinks. The city quickly pivoted and said, oh, yeah, you can get alcohol to go. So I do think that our feeling about alcohol has changed, and I have to applaud the city planners for thinking through and being supportive. And so, we're kind of optimistic, but we're using the Larchmont 2021 conversation and the survey and our work with the LBA and the business owners to try to inform what we think might be some suggestions we could make to CD5 and CD 13.
No, wonderful. Todd, what are your thoughts on what the Boulevard needs to do to move itself forward?
Well, I think I agree just with what Patty was saying, but I think, I love the idea of beautifying it a little bit more. I think it is a very charming street, but I think there's a lot more we can do. I think, I love that more and more we see in LA and a lot of communities, like the lights over the street, the gateway. There's just, I think there's a lot more we can, and even making it easier, for, I think we had talked about like the EV chargers there. Okay. We talked about like a place like the drop-offs points for like the like Ubers and Lyfts and stuff like that. Sure. Stuff making it easier for people to get there and to stay there, and to shop there, and more plants and more beautification. I think is really, really great. Yeah.
Well, because I think while it's such a community that gets a draw from those who live nearby, increasingly, it's got such a reputation that it is a draw regionally as well. So that's important. Joanna, what are your thoughts on what the Boulevard needs to cultivate to move forward?
I fully support what Todd's saying. Is that if I don't know how it happens, because who pays for the beautification? I've always loved the string lights, and it was a perfect opportunity to have the park lit to be able to put string lights in front of the restaurants. Whereas previously, I was, years ago, I was like, oh, it'd be amazing if you could have those beautiful string lights across the buildings. But then the question was, well, who pays for the electricity? Who puts up the lights? Who maintains the lights? So there's a million things. If you had an endless budget and you knew who was and you had everyone on the same page, that you could just make that street amazing. Right. But it's getting who does it, who organizes it, who pays for it,
Well, to that point, Patty, who are some of the main, business and community organizations, and how collaborative are they? Because we always want to foster more civic knowledge and engagement, but also collaboration. So who are some of the key organizations that are sort of driving community?
Well, I was just talking to John Kalitsky about this morning before I came, and we think the Village Bid, the Larchmont Village Bid, is definitely one of the players. The Larchmont Boulevard Association is one of the players. The neighborhood associations, not just the adjacent ones, but all of the ones around. The people who actually use the street. So that was kind of the group that we were trying to reach out to with the conversation. We could use some really good leaders, and I see two of them right here. So I'm going to tap them. But I mean, I think that's what it takes. Todd's invested a lot. Joanna and Steve have invested a lot. These are the people who can really make it happen, and they create that sense of urgency that the city needs to see and hear. And then people like me can serve to amplify their voices, and we can provide them with information. But I think right now what we need is some really good local leadership, and we have just kind of this really interesting window. Okay. So we are optimistic with Larchmont 2021, the conversation piece, that we can play a role in helping to move things forward, because Joanna's right. It's really bureaucratic, and it's discouraging sometimes, with good ideas. It used to be in this photograph on the cover of the book with those Christmas decorations, spanning the street. Mm-hmm. They were hung on the street line poles. Right. Yeah. And then in the 50s, the city took down those poles. So it's like, okay, how do we put that back?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think that's great. And, sometimes change is a challenge. But I think, with a new council member, and of course, Councilmember O'Farrell has been so community-centric, whether it's Hollywood or Echo Park or Atwater Village. I'm sure he will follow in Tom LaBonge's footsteps of being really attuned to the needs of local community and local businesses in the Larchmont area. And of course, having celebrated 100 years, there's a lot of opportunity for the next 100 years, and so there's going to be a lot of attention paid to this particular community.
And I think Councilmember O'Farrell is he's been very involved with the communities and stuff so I think it is a good time. What you were saying, now's a good time to really work on that, and I think he's the perfect person to really help with that too.
Well, and we're grateful to have him on for episode 50. So, so it's a great tie-in. So this has been great. And, one of the things we always like to do in our community spotlights is share with our listeners some of the favorites of this particular community. So whether you're visiting Los Angeles or living on the other side of the hill in the valley, if you come to Larchmont, here we have three civic leaders. So in this lightning round of our podcast, we're going to get an inside look at their respective Larchmont. So 1 word, 2 word answers. Are we ready?
Ready.
Todd, starting with you, favorite restaurant or two?
Well, of course, Vernetti and La Poubelle, which has been on Franklin since 1969.
Okay. Joanna, and you can name your own restaurant.
Oh, well, I mean, Vernetti. We eat there all the time. And are we talking just Larchmont?
No, we can go favorite. Inside look at your Larchmont or Los Angeles.
Okay. Currently, it's Gigi. It's on...
on Sycamore.
Yeah.
Yes.
Really enjoying it.
Oh, nice.
It's charming.
Patty?
Well, I have to say Vernetti, but I also have to say the Larchmont wine and cheese sandwiches.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right? I second that.
An institution.
Yes.
Favorite place for a sip, whether that's coffee or cocktail or tea, or where do you go, Patty?
Lately I go to Le Pan Quotidien.
That's my spot.
Yeah, Le Pan also is one of my favorite places. Yeah,
two for Le Pan Quotidien. Joanna?
I'm going to say Go Get 'em Tiger.
Okay, go
I
ahead.
love their coffee. And people watching there is just amazing. I could sit there all day and watch. Yeah.
That's out of my budget range. Favorite place to take a visitor, Larchmont or Los Angeles? Patty.
Oh my gosh. Well, it really kind of depends on the visitor.
Okay.
But I'm a total garden buff, so I would say the Huntington, Descanso, the Arboretum, even Virginia Robinson. I mean, you name it, I got a garden list.
Okay, excellent. Gardens. Todd.
Griffith Park. I love taking people to the observatory, taking them on hikes up to the Hollywood sign. The merry-go-round that has so much history there. So I love Griffith Park. Yeah.
Excellent. Joanna?
I'm a museum person, so the Broad, any museum will go there. I also happen to love Descanso Gardens. That's like my favorite of all the.
Okay.
It's just charming.
Favorite community activity or event, Todd?
The Oscars. I think living in Los Angeles and just I love the seeing everybody dress up and just all of that, and so I that's one of my favorite events.
Joanna?
I'm going to go Larchmont specific and say the Halloween carnival. Is it called
The
carnival?
family
The
fair.
family fair, yes.
Yeah.
That's always,
Excellent.
it's charming.
That's sweet.
Yeah.
Patty?
Oh, I'm going to go citywide and say the Hollywood Bowl.
Oh.
Right? It is the quintessential LA experience. And then this Christmas, day after Christmas, I've roped my family into volunteering to stuff flowers into the Rose Parade floats.
Oh, wow.
Oh,
yeah.
That's fun.
exciting.
Yeah,
That's
so those would be my two iconic LA experiences.
Okay. Well, this has been a great conversation. We're really, really excited to celebrate the work that you're doing, not only for Larchmont, but for the city of Los Angeles. As I said earlier, this is a big year for us as a city, so thank you for being a part of this. As we like to say on Civitas LA, the guest gets the final word. So any concluding thoughts, any calls to action that you'd like to share with our audience? Let's start with Joanna.
Calls to action. I would say, everyone says it, but go local. If you want your neighborhood businesses to exist, go support them. And that's really the magic.
Okay. Todd?
Again, go local, but also the Tailwaggers Foundation. It's our nonprofit, the tailwaggersfoundation.org. We give out grants every month to rescue dogs and cats in need. So, yeah, that would be my call to action.
Excellent. Patty?
I would say shop local, take our survey, and vote in the election that's coming up.
Mm-hmm. No, outstanding. Well, this dialogue has been great, and we appreciate your time, and we appreciate your service to community. Patty, Todd, and Joanna, thank you for joining us today. And to our audience, thank you for tuning in. And as Patty just said, go local, but also don't forget to vote this year. So we hope you enjoyed this program, and we hope you'll join us in 2 weeks as we look forward to another great civic conversation as we kick off another exciting year at Civitas LA. Until we meet again, stay strong and get involved. To learn more about Civitas LA and to share feedback on this program or recommend a future program, please visit us at www.civitasla.com. And don't forget to connect with us on Facebook at Civitas LA, on Instagram at Civitas_LA, and on Twitter at Civitas_LA.